Hello, global gardeners. Happy Monday. Happy Labor Day. It's a holiday in the United States, and it's so great as always to see you here. Shout out to Andrea in the Black Hills, who's able to watch us on this Monday. And so nice to have you here. So nice to have the regulars showing up. And I look forward to new people discovering us as they have the opportunity to learn about garlic. So I've had some recent videos about garlic. I have quite a few videos about garlic, but today that'll be the main focus of the show. How to plant it, how to take care of it, how to harvest it, how to use it and preserve it, and then of course answer all of your questions. Whether it has to be about garlic, don't worry about it. If there's something else you're concerned about, we'll just talk gardening for the next 90 minutes like we do every Monday. Favorite day of the gardening week for me and for so many of you. It's so great to see you here. And Bettina's got an overcast and cool day in Ontario, Canada. And I saw that Central Point with Adam is going to be in the hundreds tomorrow. That's over 38 degrees Celsius. It's going to be close to that here for me as well. We're 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit above normal. So it's nice. We're enjoying the hot weather, but we also know that winter is coming. And that's why I want to talk about garlic today, because most of us focus on our vegetable gardens as a primary gardening activity for the whole year. And then as we get those last hot days of summer and the plants start fading, we look at winter just being around the corner, and our season tends to just cease. We'll clean up our beds. Maybe, hopefully, you'll have a fall garden. But if you're not growing garlic, think about growing garlic, because this is a great time to think about garlic. And one of the things I'll be talking about is not just in the northern hemisphere, where we're going to be planting our garlic soon, but in the southern hemisphere, you can also plant garlic in spring. And this is an activity that most of us don't think about. Garlic, as we buy it at the store, we see pictures of it in catalogs, has that nice big bulb. And for that bulb to form, the garlic clove, which is what you plant, needs to be exposed to cold temperatures. It's that cold temperature in the soil in winter that actually causes the bulb to develop. When you plant garlic in warm regions, you may not get that bulb development because the cold is needed. So in warm regions, you can still grow garlic, any type of garlic, and just recognize that it's not going to have the big bulb formation. Right now in the southern hemisphere, as you're in your spring approaching summer, you can go ahead and plant garlic cloves. When you do it like that, where you're not exposing the bulb to an overwintering time period, to that cold, it grows like a green onion. And so you can harvest the leaves, you can harvest the whole plant in just a few months and use it like you would scallions or green onions. It just will have a garlic flavor to it. And it tends to be a milder garlic flavor. So my good buddy Jason, who does a lot of growing and sells at farmers markets, that's what he does in the spring here in the United States, is he'll plant garlic cloves and grow them just like green onions. And then he'll harvest them in June, maybe early July. They don't have the big bulb development, but he's a chef and he cooks with it like a green onion, but it adds that garlic flavor. So I wanted to start with that because that's a whole new concept for many people, is growing garlic without wanting or being able to grow that big bulb. And I like the big bulb, and that's the primary way that I grow my garlic, but you don't have to do it that way. And that's what's so wonderful about garlic, is there's options, and you can grow it in a number of different ways in different areas with different varieties. So let's go ahead, and Das Roberts is asking, can you replant garlic in the same place year after year? Yes, you can. Now, like most plants that you're putting into the same bed year after year, those plants are going to absorb nutrients that that plant needs. And different plants will absorb more nitrogen from the soil or more phosphorus from the soil. And so what you need to be aware of when you put garlic into the same bed is that between planting or between harvest and planting, you should revitalize the soil. You should add more organic matter, and you should get the soil nutrient rich for that new course of garlic coming in. Because if you're putting garlic in the fall, it's going to be in the ground for 8 or 9 months for most of us. And so you really don't have a great opportunity to replenish the soil while it's growing. Then you harvest it, and then about 3 months later, you're putting more garlic in. And so that's the approach I take, and I show this in one of my videos, I think I did a year ago, where I harvest the garlic, and then I add organic matter to the soil and give that soil 2 months, or maybe even the full 3 months before I plant in it again. That's what you would do with a garlic bed. Grow your garlic, amend the soil, give it a couple months for that soil life to just explode and start releasing the nutrients out of that organic matter that's in the soil. Then when you put the new garlic cloves in, you have a complete new season, and you can do that year after year. Gilroy, California, as I mentioned in my recent video, is where most of the garlic in the United States is grown, and they grow in the same fields year after year. Now, granted, it's commercial agriculture. They're using fertilizers rather than the soil amendment practices that I like to use. But the concept is still the same. As long as you're replenishing the nutrients that the plants need, you can grow it in the same bed year after year, and you should be able to have the same success each year as what you would expect. Jeff is wondering, the cold could cause the bulb to split. It will still bulb up, but it'll be a single bulbous clove. Yeah, that's true. So when we put our cloves in the ground, the target time is usually 4 to 6 weeks before you expect a hard freeze. And that may only be 4 weeks before your first frost of fall. And if you put your cloves in the ground at planting time, and usually about twice the height of the clove, about 3 inches deep usually, and I've got videos that show how to do all of this, and then you mulch over it, that tends to keep the soil moisture and the soil temperature more consistent, and you're less likely to have splitting or to have problems with the cloves. Because if you plant too close to the freeze, or you attempt to plant when the ground has already started freezing, you can definitely have some problems with your cloves. So allow that time to plan, and now's about the time for most of us. And now's also the time to start acquiring the garlic before it runs out at the nursery or on online sites. And you can buy your garlic early. So I'm planning to put my garlic in the ground in about 5 or 6 weeks. I already have my garlic. I'm using the garlic that I just harvested a couple months ago. But you can buy your garlic cloves now, or hopefully if you can find a gardener to give you some bulbs for planting. Get everything set up. You have the bulbs ready to go. And now in another month or so, you can put everything in the ground. You don't need to wait till the last minute, and I highly recommend that you don't wait to get your garlic before planting. Because if you think, oh, I'm going to put my cloves in the ground in 6 weeks, so in 5 weeks, I'll go to the nursery and see what they have, you might not have much to choose from. And that's the way I used to do it in the olden days. And that's one of those things that you learn. If you can plan ahead and prep for it, you'll be able to find some really cool and interesting and enjoyable and tasty varieties. But those are usually the ones that everybody likes to grow, which is why they sell out so quickly. Lil Mac says, hello, Gardener Scott. We're in Florida. How to amend sandy Florida soil? I really want to start growing in the ground, but so far it seems like a very expensive endeavor if I were to start digging up the sand. Organic matter. It's all about organic matter. It takes time. You can start by just getting bags of compost. As you start making your own compost, that's what I would recommend, is use your own compost. But that also takes some time. So get some compost and just start working it in. The first beds, the first gardening that I did here in Colorado about 25 years ago, that's what I did. Just every year, just added compost and peat moss and grass clippings and just added organic matter to the soil every year. And it took 2 to 3 years before the soil was finally reaching the point that plants were doing well, because I had a very sandy soil here in Colorado. It takes time. You can try to do it all at once, but if you've got the patience and you've got the desire, that's what you do. Just slowly add organic matter in the spring and the fall to begin, and eventually your sandy soil will be richer. All of that organic matter in the sandy soil act like little sponges to hold moisture, and then it encourages all the soil life to come in. And when you got the soil life and the moisture and the earthworms start showing up, now you've got a garden that you can grow in. Started with sandy soil, and it's the same thing if you got clay soil. Exactly the same process to follow to improve any type of soil. And after a little bit of time, you'll be able to garden and then think back to the days when you weren't able to garden because things were so sandy and so hard. And that's so many people here in this part of Colorado have difficulty gardening because the soil is so sandy, but they're not making the attempt to improve the soil. They keep trying to grow in the sandy soil and then saying, I can't get tomatoes to grow. I can't get peppers to grow. All these things that the rest of us are enjoying. They're saying, wow, I just can't get that in my garden. Well, it's because they're not taking the time to improve their soil. So that's really the key to it. So I see Tony from Simplified Gardening is checked on. Always nice to have you here, Tony. And so nice to see a lot of the others. Jean-Pierre from Europe, Evening in Belgium. Nice to see you here as well. And Riverdale Gardens is here. I know you guys don't get to join us often on these Mondays, but nice to see you here on this holiday. I'm going to experiment with planting the bulbils this fall. Have you been experienced with this? Yes. So when we talk about propagating garlic, the most common and the recommended way of propagating, of planting the garlic, is to take the bulb and you break it apart into the individual cloves, and then you plant those cloves. Well, not all garlic does it. Some garlics, typically the hardneck varieties, will form bulbils. That's a hard word to say. And they're actually little bulbs that are on the outside of the plant. They're actually on the stalk, close to where the flower head would be. And you can take those and put them in the ground, and they'll start growing into a garlic plant. Now, it varies slightly from plant to plant, but basically what happens is a 2-year cycle. So when you plant those bulbils, they'll start growing, and after a year, they won't fully develop into the big bulb that we're expecting. But if you let them stay in the ground longer, then they'll form more of that bulb that you would be expecting. Or, like I was talking earlier, growing the spring garlic, the bulbils after 1 year will essentially form a spring garlic for you. And a wonderful way to do it, it just takes longer. Just like a garlic seed, you can actually let the flowers develop on garlic and save the seeds and plant the seeds, and it's the same kind of thing. It's at least a 2-year process to be able to harvest garlic when you start with those parts of the plant. But definitely something to do. Lilies work the same way. I have propagated lilies using the bulbils that will form on the stalk of the plant. And it takes time, usually a whole extra season, but it's fun. So I definitely suggest that you experiment with it because it is a new for many of us, an interesting way to grow garlic or any plant that has those bulbils on them. I haven't said that word in a couple years, so I'm sorry I'm having trouble with it. So 54 Cal says, question, good morning, Gardener Scott, can we get your salsa recipe? Yes, and actually, I was just thinking about that yesterday. I'm going to start filming a video. I'm not sure if it's coming out, if I'm going to do it this week or next week, but my salsa garden that I did the video on is ready for harvest. I've been eating the tomatoes for a couple weeks now, and the jalapenos are ready to harvest, and the onions are ready to harvest. I've already harvested the garlic in that bed that I show in the video, and I talk about the garlic recipe coming out. But it's really quite simple. I just take the tomatoes and I'll cut them into chunks, to small cubes. I take the jalapeno and dice it relatively small. I'll add my cilantro, and not everybody likes cilantro, so this is one of those optional items, but I like to add the cilantro. I'll add a couple cloves of garlic and mince it all pretty well. And then I will add a little bit of lime juice, and then I also usually add some red wine vinegar. And that's essentially it. And sometimes I might add the tomatillos, but I'm not planning to do the tomatillos in these first batches I'm doing. And so what it comes down to is essentially I'm making a pico de gallo, which is a raw garden fruit and vegetable dip that has a little bit of acidity, and that's what the lime juice and the vinegar add. And then sometimes I'll sprinkle a little bit of sugar on it if I want it a little bit sweeter, but I don't always do that. So if you like a tomato heavy pico de gallo, you'll use more tomatoes. So I like a lot of tomatoes, so it tends to be let's say 12 cherry tomatoes, and to that I'll add 1 jalapeno and 1 clove of garlic and a tablespoon or so of the cilantro, and then some lime juice and just a dash of the red wine vinegar, just so it's a little bit softer, it's not so chunky, and that's it. It's as simple as that. And then I'll vary that recipe a little bit. If I want it a little bit hotter, I'll either add more jalapenos, or I always grow cayenne peppers, and I usually dry my cayenne peppers, so I'll sprinkle some of my cayenne pepper onto the salsa as well. So nothing fancy, pretty simple, but you get that garden fresh flavor, and the heat is adjustable depending on how much of the jalapenos or how much of the cayenne you put in. And it's the kind of thing that it's gone. I usually make enough to be able to eat without saving, and then towards the end of the season I'll just make a bunch and save it and freeze it and give it away. And I've even canned my salsa. The problem with canning, I did that video about canning and talked about pH. The problem with canning a salsa is you need to make sure that the pH is low enough that you don't run into any food safety issues. So when I can the salsa, I add a lot more vinegar to bring the pH down so that I can can it. But I still use the same basic ingredients of tomatoes and onions and garlic and cilantro. So that's the way I like it. But hopefully that video will be coming out here soon and you'll be able to see what it is. Yeah, Yogi Lai says, love fresh pico season. And this is exactly my time of year. I love the fresh tomatoes and the fresh pico as well. Chris Houston, I noticed a lot of my garlics are lying over. Those ones are in a bit more shade though. Why would they be lying over? So if the leaves are turning brown, the outer leaves are turning brown and they're lying over, that's an indication that they're ready to harvest. If the leaves are all green and they're lying over, it could be a normal reaction to hot temperatures. They're basically wilting. And so if they're lying over and then they perk back up in the shade or when the sun starts going down, that's usually a watering issue or a wilting issue. But if they're in the shade and they're lying over, it could be that they're not getting enough sun. And garlic is one of those plants that really likes full sun. You can grow with a little bit of shade, but that could be part of the problem, is they're just not getting enough sun. And so the plants aren't growing strong enough, and they're falling over because they don't have the leaves as strong as they need to be, because they're not growing to their potential because they're in too much shade. So check the soil moisture to see if you might need to water a little bit more, and that would help. But if it's shade and mostly shade, that could be a big part of it. They need more sun. And the solution is just to plant them in a different location next time if you can, and take advantage of the sun, because that's really one of those things that they like to have. Coastal Gardens Northwest says, I'm going to make some tomato sauce tonight. Any tips? And so the thing about making tomato sauce generally is the type of tomato. So if you're using a paste tomato that is intended for making tomato sauce, then it should be a pretty easy process. If you're using just tomatoes from your garden, like black Krim, that's the one I always like to talk about because it's my favorite. Black Krim is a crazy tasty, wonderful tomato, but it's not a paste tomato. The black Krim, like many of the tomatoes that we tend to grow in the summer, has a lot more juice in it, and the pulp isn't as firm. Tastes great, but it doesn't make a good sauce. It's just too watery. And so when you go to make your tomato sauce, do try to choose the paste tomatoes, the ones that aren't as liquidy, the ones that are firmer and more solid, and that's what makes the best tomato sauce. And so if that's what you're using, excuse me, it's a simple matter of just cutting it all up, slow cooking it, adding whatever herbs and spices you want, and that's it. Tomato sauce is one of the simplest and easiest things to make, but it starts by choosing the right tomatoes for the best success. And so, let's see, the determinant, that's another thing, and it's too late if you're making it tonight, but if you want to think about, and maybe this is what you did, but for the rest of us, if you are growing tomatoes for the purpose of making sauce, the determinant paste tomatoes are really the best way to do it, because the determinant tomato gives you the harvest all at once. Within a very short period of time, you get a whole bunch of fruit. It's all ripening at about the same rate. And so you can go out and harvest a whole bunch of tomatoes and make your paste. And then the plant is done and you can put something else in that space. Making sauce from most of the indeterminate tomatoes, even the sauce tomatoes, the paste tomatoes that are indeterminates like San Marzano, you're not going to get a big harvest all at once. You're going to get a steady harvest. And so in that case, you need to grow a lot of San Marzano plants to be able to get enough tomatoes to do batches of the tomato sauce. And then a few weeks later, you can make another batch of the tomato sauce. So choosing the right type of tomato plant can also make a big difference. Okay, let's see. Coastal Garden says, I'm using a mix from the garden. I do have black Krim. They're a lovely tomato. I also have black pineapple, but I won't use them in it. And so if you use like black Krim to make the sauce, I would say go ahead and cut up all your tomatoes and put them in a strainer. Let some of that juice flow out before you start making the paste, and the process might be a little bit easier. If you put all the tomatoes in right away, like I said, it's going to be very watery, and it's going to take longer for that sauce to develop because you have to wait till all that water boils off. And that's why the paste tomatoes are so great, because you don't have all that water, and the sauce can begin forming as soon as you put all the tomatoes into the pot. Okay, Paul says, I'm going to have to build a cage. I'm starting my first garden next year, going to build up the soil now, of course. Awesome. Yeah, and And this is one of those things, I'll be talking about soil in a couple weeks. I'll have a live stream dedicated to soil because the fall, I think, is really the best time of year to start thinking about improving the soil for next year. And so I'm glad to hear that, K. Paul, that you're going to be building a soil now, because that's exactly the way to do it. Like most things, if you wait till the last minute, it's too late. You're not going to get the good results. If you plan ahead and you take the time to do it, you'll have much better results. Andrea is saying my San Marzano plant is massive. I've gotten so many plants or tomatoes, it just blows my mind. San Marzano is a good one. And for making sauce, it doesn't get much better than San Marzano. A lot of the cans of tomato sauce, or even cans of tomatoes, the premium brands that you'll buy at the store are often San Marzano tomatoes. So that's a great one to grow in the garden because it's recognized around the world as a superior based tomato. Definitely a good way to do it. Skippy Dugan, my Roma plants came back to life with a little cooler weather. Seems like 100 new blooms and fruit. That's awesome. The Roma is another great paste tomato that is really made for the sauces. So good for you. And Roma's another great one to have in the garden. Tina's wondering, what's best, to let the garlic plant get covered by snow in the winter, bring it into the greenhouse, or just leave it outside with a cover on it? Leave it outside. Garlic is very, very hardy. It can handle the cold. It can handle freezing conditions. And that's what causes the bulb to develop. So if you bring it into your greenhouse, you'll make the plant comfortable, but you might not get that bulb development, which is what most of us are growing the garlic for. So leave it outside. I'm in zone 5B. Temperatures get down to minus 15 Fahrenheit, about minus 26 Celsius. And I have great success with garlic. I showed my beds in some of my earlier videos this year. Great garlic year for me. And my garlic stayed outside in those cold conditions, covered by mulch and snow. And then in spring, they pop up and grow. And a couple months after that, you have your garlic. So yeah, just leave it outside, covered by snow, and it should be fine. That's really what you like, or what you should want in your garlic, is to give them those kind of conditions. Okay, let's see. Blue Wolf says, do you freeze dry or consider getting a freeze drying machine? Great question. You and I must be on the same wavelength. I'm getting a freeze drying machine tomorrow. So it's funny that you should be asking that, because it's being delivered tomorrow. I am so excited about it. I'm looking forward to it. I've been waiting decades to get a freeze drying machine. And so now I'm getting one, and I'll be making videos, because I've got my videos on making jellies and jams and drying herbs and fermenting and pickling and canning. And now I'll add freeze drying to that list. So that all of you, as you preserve your harvests, and you've heard me say this before, that's what you should be thinking about. Growing a garden and preserving your harvest should be hand in hand. Part of your planning every year should include both of those components. And 20 years ago almost, I became a master food preserver, and I taught classes in food preservation to include freeze drying. But back then, freeze drying was all commercial. It really wasn't an option for home gardeners. And now it is. Only within the last 10 years or so have they had the home freeze drying machines. And so, yes, Blue Wolf, I do plan on doing freeze drying, and to include garlic. I'm definitely going to be freeze drying the garlic, and you can expect to see that in a video as well. So funny you should ask that, because coincidentally, it's supposed to be delivered tomorrow, and I'll be showing you more about that. I'm really excited about that. That's one of those arenas that I really want to get into. Tony's saying, I was thinking of getting a freeze drying machine. I have a dehydrator, and I've used a dehydrator for 20 years, and I love my dehydrator, and I do a lot of dehydrating. Freeze drying, as you probably know, is a completely new level. You can freeze dry anything, and to include macaroni and cheese and stew and tomato sauce, for instance. So this is one of those great options, and this is one of those things that I'm looking forward to making videos about. When you make, you have all of your paste tomatoes and you make tomato sauce, well, the sauce either needs to be eaten or frozen to be used later. When you freeze dry, you can actually freeze dry tomato sauce. You can store it in a jar on your shelf. And when you want tomato sauce, you just pull out a couple tablespoons of the freeze-dried tomato sauce, add some boiling water, and presto, you have instant tomato sauce that tastes exactly like the tomato sauce before you put it into the freeze dryer. So it's an incredible concept, incredible way of preserving, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. So yeah, Tony, let's chat about the freeze dryer. Once I get mine, I can share stories with you, and maybe you'll see Simplified Gardening channel having some freeze drying videos in the future, depending on whether Tony makes that investment or not. So yeah, Rick, thanks. I am planning on enjoying the freeze dryer. I've been chatting about it with my family. They're probably tired of hearing me talk about the freeze dryer that I'm going to be getting and using, but it's definitely something I'm looking forward to, and it's going to be fun. Andrea says they're using a super sauce hybrid tomato in the garden. Haven't grown that. A huge paste tomato. Can't wait till they're ripe. Awesome. You'll have to tell us about that in the weeks ahead. And I hope it works well for you. Now, so there's a lot, and I'll be covering this in future videos, of course. But there's a lot about growing that, for me, I will choose the plants based on what I'm planning to preserve and how I'm going to preserve it. And so garlic, for instance, I grow a ton of garlic because I can store it in my cool basement and it lasts for months and months. Or like last year, I did a video on how to make garlic powder, where you dehydrate the garlic, and that's a way to preserve it. It's now you have the garlic, but you have it as a powder. And I grow my hot peppers so that I can dehydrate them and have the hot peppers. But there's a lot that I don't grow or don't grow more of, like the paste tomatoes, because I love making salsa and I love making tomato sauce, but you run out of room in your freezer because that's about the only option you have of saving some of those. You can can them, but it usually requires pressure canning methods. And because of my high altitude, I have a pressure canner, but my altitude is so high that I am even limited in what I can in my pressure canner, and that doesn't include a lot of those kind of sauces. But now, with the freeze dryer, next year, I'm planning on growing many more paste tomatoes to make some of those things that I'll be able to freeze dry rather than the dehydration or the freezing methods. And so you can expect a lot more on that. And I'm actually hoping, for those of you that might be thinking about freeze drying or already doing it, as I've been trying to learn more and more about it, there isn't a lot of information out there. It's only been within the last 10 years or so that you could even do it at home. And there aren't books and guidelines and good sources to really tell you how to do it. So in some respects, I'm going to be breaking new ground. And so as I figure out what to do and what to plant and how to put it all together, I'll be telling you about it. And it's basically new stuff because very few others are doing this right now. So I'm actually looking forward to kind of being on the leading edge of tying gardening into freeze drying because there's just not a lot out there. So look forward to that. I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Frank says, I had some super Italian paste tomatoes started with 100-degree Fahrenheit hit for 2 to 3 weeks and couldn't water enough. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Yeah, these high temperatures have just been crazy for so many of us that it's just... I'm not ready for winter yet, but I am ready for some of these hot temperatures to fade away and we can get back to maybe a normal temperature pattern. Blue Wolf is saying, order extra trays for the freeze dryer. Yes, actually, I am getting extra trays for the freeze dryer, so thank you for that tip, because it's one of those things I'm trying to be as prepared as possible before I do it, and a lot of it is the extra trays. So that's wonderful. I'm looking forward to that. Sunset Gazing says, can't wait to see the videos on freeze drying. Some of us can now live vicariously through you, watching you freeze dry your garden harvest. Awesome. Yeah. It's one of those things, and I don't want to say too much about it because I am planning a video when I unbox and tell you the reason behind it and how to dehydrate and all that kind of fun stuff. But yeah, I've been waiting 20 years for this to happen. So it's one of those things that it takes a while. It's an investment, and I'm going to allow you and lots of others to live vicariously, because that's what I've been doing for years. Whenever I see a freeze drying video, I'm living vicariously through some of those other channels. There aren't a lot of them that have videos, and yeah, now I can do it too. Yogi Eli is saying dehydrated tomato slices with garlic and onion powder and Italian seasoning are easy and delicious. Oh, that sounds so good. And that's exactly the idea. I'm hoping some of my first freeze drying is going to be exactly that. And not just the tomato slices, but beet slices and turnip slices and zucchini slices. You just slice them, season them like you're saying, put them in the freeze dryer. They come out. It's astronaut food that you may have already eaten. It's backpacking food. It's a lot of the stuff that many of us have eaten, but we didn't really think too much about the process. Yeah, tomato chips is a great idea, and I'm really looking forward to trying some tomato slices with seasoning as a snack. Just a tomato chip. What a concept. So thanks for that idea, because that's one of those things that I'm looking forward to experimenting with. So it'll be fun, and I'll take you all along on the journey as well. And then maybe at some point you'll decide to get a freeze dryer of your own, because it's easy. It's just one of, like you said, with the tomato slices, it's easy, and I like easy over difficult any day. So we'll see how that goes. So look forward to that in the days ahead, and that there will definitely be more for it. So, okay, let's see. Well, let's see. I grew federal and pink oxheart this year, and I tried growing. So when we talk about tomatoes in particular and the different varieties that we try to grow, pink oxheart I've tried growing a couple times and not had good success with it here for me in Colorado. And so that's good. I'm glad you're growing. I hope they did well for you. With the garlic, I talked about choosing garlic in the video that I just did over the weekend. The same garlic doesn't do well for everybody. And so the garlic gets broken down into the two basic categories, the hardnecks and the softnecks. And for most of us that live in areas with winter, the hardnecks tend to do better. And for those that live in areas with mild winters, the softnecks tend to do better. And it's as simple as that. But of course, like with any plant, there are softnecks that'll grow in the winter, and there are hardnecks that'll grow in the warm regions as well. Choosing a variety, like with the tomatoes, it's an experimentation process. The reason I think that I had such good success with my garlic this year is that I only grew the good bulbs that I harvested from the year before. And so I've been trying many, many different types of garlic varieties over the years. And if they don't do well, I'll use those bulbs in the kitchen, but I don't save the cloves for planting again. When the plant does really well, I'll save those cloves and continue to grow that. And so every year my garlic harvest is better than the year before, because I'm only saving the varieties that have demonstrated that they're going to do well in my climate. And so think about that with the tomatoes, with peppers, with garlic, with everything in your garden. That's one reason why I encourage experimentation. It's so that you can find those varieties that really do well for you. And I think that's one reason why old gardeners are seen as magical. They have such beautiful gardens and everything is just wonderful. Well, it's because they've taken time to figure out what does best. And back to the concept of easy, the plants that do best are usually the easiest plants because they like your garden beds, they like your climate, they like your methods of gardening, and they're going to do best. So by the time you become an old gardener, the only thing you're growing is the stuff that's easy, that has already demonstrated its desire to grow in your garden. And so now we old gardeners can kind of just sit back and enjoy what we're doing, and we don't need to experiment as much because we've figured out what works. And so that's one approach that you can take on your gardening journey, is trying all these different things. Like I tried the pink ox heart, saw that it really didn't do well, and I haven't grown it since. But I keep growing Black Krim and Sweet 100 and all of the other tomatoes that I've shown in different videos because those are the ones that are doing well. And so with garlic in particular, for those of you that are growing garlic, put in the comments what garlic varieties you're growing or which ones you prefer in your particular area. And so I know a lot of people are wondering about, what garlic should I try? And so for me, in zone 5B, music is a variety I highly recommend. It just does wonderfully in my garden. So if you grow garlic, tell us what zone you're in. Tell us what your favorite garlic variety or 2 or 3 is. And then the rest of us that are wondering what we are going to be choosing can have some guidelines, and based on your experience and where you are, that can be beneficial. So, Simplify Garden, doing a live tomorrow to explain what I've been up to at Rob's Allotment channel. Awesome. What time are you doing that, Tony? I'm guessing it might be later in the day, so hopefully some of us can join in early in the day. But yeah, share what time that would be if you would, Tony. I'll look forward to that. Or I'll go to Rob's Allotment channel and maybe he's got it posted as to when that's going to happen. I think that's awesome. Riverdale Gardens, I saved the biggest, best bulbs to replant. The missus has a hard time not using them. And so I've been dealing with that as well. So this week I made some spaghetti sauce using my garlic that I had harvested, and I had to deal with that as well because as I was using a soft neck garlic, and as I was breaking apart the bulb, some of those cloves are really beautiful, big cloves, which makes for really easy slicing and mincing and using in the kitchen. But instead, it's like, no, I have to save that big one because that's what's going back in the garden. And then it takes more time and effort to cut up all those smaller cloves or pieces of cloves, or you could throw the whole clove in. But anyway, I use those smaller cloves, and I'd like to use the big ones, but I agree with you. I put the biggest ones in the garden. That's definitely the way to do it. So, okay, let's see. Trying to scroll down, make sure I didn't miss what Tony had said about the time on that. And if I miss it, I'm sure Jay will be right on top of things. So Simplified Gardening is saying 2 p.m. That's UK time. So I think we're still at a 7-hour difference, or I'm at a 7-hour difference. So for mountain time, that would be about 7 a.m. And so I'll look for it in the morning. I'm usually up at that time. Not always on my computer, but I'll try to see you on that live tomorrow, Tony. Thanks for letting us know. So a little bit earlier on the west coast of the U.S., a little bit later on the east coast. And for those of you in Europe, you should be able to see it in the afternoon. So great. Nice to see you on the live. So I look forward to that. And the reason I'm saying I'm going to try to... Tony says it's on my channel, not Rob's channel. Okay, I guess you were talking to Rob's a lot bit in your comment. So on the Simplified Gardening channel, look for that. And Tony and I chatted a little bit a few days ago. He's done some incredible improvements and preparation for future videos. So I'm looking forward to being there, Tony, to hear more about it. And Tony's going to be making a lot more videos because of all the stuff he's been doing. So good. Update will be nice. Wasabi Gal says, I tried Polish softneck this year. Like it, but it's really spicy. I'm in zone 3, so usually only grow hardneck garlic like Montana Giant and Chestnut. I like Chestnut Red too. That's a variety I grow every year as well, but haven't done the Polish softneck. And so that's one of those things about garlic. The hardneck varieties tend to be much spicier, much more flavor intense. And so for my salsa, for instance, I actually tend to use soft neck, milder garlic when I make salsa because I'm using all the raw ingredients and I don't want the garlic to be so powerful that it's going to just take away from the taste of all the ingredients in my salsa. So while I grow a whole bunch of hardneck varieties that are really spicy, I typically am not using that garlic raw. I'm using that garlic roasted or cooked in something else. And when you roast and cook, the flavor changes completely. So very intense and fiery for a lot of those garlics when they're raw, but they really mellow out and give a completely different taste structure once they've been roasted or cooked in general. So Frank is saying 10 a.m. Central Time. I think it would be 8 a.m. Central Time, Frank. And so it'll probably be a little bit earlier than that. Yankee Sister, nice to see you here on Monday. I'm growing music, great variety. Like I said, elephant garlic, which is an allium. Yeah, the elephant garlic is in the leek family, but does have that garlic flavor. And hardneck in zone 6A. So good for you. TJ the Hawk grew Russian and German red varieties in New Hampshire. Much smaller on average than the music variety planted last year, going back to music. Music is it's just a great garlic. I've said this in previous videos and even on live streams, and I've already said it today. But if someone asks me that they haven't, or if someone tells me they haven't grown garlic and they ask me what garlics they should choose for the first time, music is always the number one that I say. Because it grows almost everywhere and it is just fabulous. The flavor and just how the plant grows, it's almost foolproof. And so I'm glad to hear so many of you are doing music because it really is the way to do it. Janice is saying, don't know which to plant, first time planting garlic. There you go. So Janice, I would say look for music as a variety to start with. And that should do okay in 7B. 7B gives you a few more options because your winters will be cold enough that the garlic will be okay. And so you could grow the soft neck and the hard neck equally well. But if you only choose one, do music, and then from there branch out a little bit to some of these others that are wondering about it. Judy's asking where you can get music. Almost anywhere. If you go online and just type in buy garlic bulbs, you're going to get 24 online sites, and I can almost assure you that every single one of them will sell music. And I also know locally in the nurseries here, the garden nurseries, almost all of them sell garlic and all of them sell music. And my guess is it's that way in most areas. So check out your local plant nursery and also look online because music is very common and readily available almost everywhere. So definitely look at something like that. Now, one of the other things I want to talk about today when we talk about garlic, so I mentioned that they need the winter temperatures to form the bulbs, and that in warm regions you can grow garlic like green onions and you won't get the bulb development. If you are in zone 9, and with some varieties in zone 8, but zone 8, 9, 10, and you want to grow garlic that bulbs, you can still do it, but you need to fool the bulb. And so it's a process, vernalization. We basically are mimicking winter. And so you get your bulbs, music, or whatever else you want to choose, and stick it in your refrigerator for a couple months. If you put that garlic bulb in your refrigerator for 6 to 8 weeks, you're mimicking winter. You're fooling that bulb into thinking that it's in the ground in cold conditions. And then you plant it in your Florida garden, and it should grow well, and you should get some bulb development. So you like I said at the very beginning, you can grow garlic anywhere. It's just a question now of what extra efforts you want to take and whether you want the bulb or not. So yeah, think about for those of you in the warm regions, sticking your garlic in the refrigerator and then putting it into the ground. And now would be the time to do that because these bulbs are available for sale in most places. And you're in Florida and you want garlic, buy it now, stick it in the refrigerator, and 2 months from now you can put it in the ground and grow it over the winter and expect that you'll actually have some good garlic that you can save the cloves of and do it all over again. Bohemian Herbology is saying soft necks preserve at room temperature around a year, cured correctly. Hard neck varieties not as long. Yeah, that's another good reason in choosing. And I'm experimenting a little bit, but I still have cloves from last year's harvest. They're more than 12 months now, and that's exactly what I'm planning on doing is planting some of those soft neck cloves from over a year ago to see how successful they should be, because I've been storing them in a nice, cool, dark location that whole time. The hard neck cloves, yeah, they've long since dried. So for storing, the soft necks definitely store longer. You're exactly right. And the hard necks not as long. But I haven't planted cloves in the past that were 15 months old. So I'm actually looking forward to see it. I'm guessing some of those cloves are actually going to grow into plants and should do well. But it's all the soft necks that can last that long, and that actually makes a big difference. And so Garden Dilemma is asking, will music grow in zone 10? So yeah, just like I said, music will grow in zone 10, but you won't get the bulb development unless you stick the clove or the bulbs. Well, you could break it into individual cloves, but it's easier just to put the whole bulb in. Put the bulb in your refrigerator, not the freezer, in your refrigerator for couple months, and you should be able to grow it in zone 10 without too much trouble. Let's see, Riverdale saying Persian Star is my newest addition. Slightly spicy with the 4th planting. Awesome. So Persian Star in zone 5B. I haven't grown that one. I'll have to take a look and see what it is. Let's see. Susan, there you go. Right on top of it. Zone 9B. And already has hers in the fridge. So there you go. Yeah, I'm not just making this stuff up. There's a lot of us that do it this way. So that's awesome. Let's see. Tony says, sorry, folks, I have to go. Catch you all tomorrow. Yeah, hope to see you tomorrow. Have a good day at work. Looking forward to that live stream. So Tina's wondering, how can I share photos of the greenhouse I just finished erecting this weekend? I'm so proud of it. Mostly upcycled material and sitting on the contour. So you can send it. And any of you can do this. If you send me a photo at gardnerscott@gardnerscott.com, then I'll be able to see it and I can comment on it, and you can definitely show off and brag, and I'll let you know that it looks wonderful, because I like seeing those pictures too. If you want to have it included as a background picture, do specify, hey, here's a picture of my greenhouse, and you have my permission to use the photo. That way I can use it. I'm not going to use a photo unless I specifically have your permission to use it. And attach it as a file. That's usually the best way to do it. I'll talk about that here in just a little bit. And I'll be glad to take a look at your pictures. Or you can become a member of the Gardener Scott channel, clicking on the join button if you're watching on a PC, or click on the link in the description below. And if you join the channel, you can join the the Facebook group, and we share a ton of pictures back and forth on the Garner Scott Facebook group for the members. And so that's a great opportunity as well. And so we've got 150 people or so, I think, on that Facebook group. And we're talking and asking questions and answering and sharing photos and sharing videos. And it's a great way to share the pictures of what you're doing in the garden, not just with me, but with a lot of the people that are on the show today that are part of the membership. So a couple different options there. And yeah, send that, Tina. I'd like to see that. Let's go ahead and talk about the background photo today. This comes from Olivia Upel, and you can see it's a little bit fuzzy. This was an embedded picture in the email, so the quality isn't as high as if you send me a full photo file that tends to have a little better resolution. So it's a little fuzzy today. That's just because the picture was embedded in an email, and that's why it comes out this way. But I wanted to show this today. I love talking about getting kids involved with gardening and things you can do with your family members. And so this is just a beautiful flower bed that Olivia sent me, and it is a 4-H project. And in the United States, 4-H is an organization to get kids involved with all kinds of different activities, gardening just being one of them. And so this is the 4-H project on the side of the house, and it's beautiful. I often talk about and show the vegetable garden pictures, and we talk a lot about vegetable gardening in these live streams, but I wanted to point out some of the things when you design and grow flower beds, and a lot of those design elements are here. And so height is one thing. So you've got height on this side, you've got some height right here, you've got height on this side with this little trellis that's in this pot, and then in between the height you've got the low areas right here, and you've got low areas right here. And that's really a good design element when you're putting flowers in, is you've got low flowers and high flowers and medium flowers. And when it comes to the colors, you've got different options. So like on this side, there's lighter colors. So white fades into this tangerine peach color, which fades into the yellow, which becomes green. So that's a gradual change of color. Whereas on this other side, you have the white that comes into the red, and then you've got the blue, and then you've got the orange. And so two complete different style elements in this same bed, where you've got the complementary colors and the contrasting colors, and they both look great. And then one thing that's often left out of flower beds that I really like seeing here is the green plant here and the green plants here. And so flower beds really shouldn't be all flowers. You really should have that green element, that constant color to break up the contrasting colors that you might have, or the complementary colors that you might have. So really good design elements. And so I'm guessing because it was part of a 4-H project that they did some research and they looked into choosing different colors and choosing the different plants that would grow well together. And this is the result. And I think it's definitely something you should be proud of. I hope the rest of the 4-Hers were able to see it and tell you that they liked it as well. And I definitely think it's one of those things that the rest of us can learn from in our flower gardens. And I've said this before as well, that if you're growing vegetables, you should also be growing flowers, because the flowers in your garden are going to be attracting the pollinators and the beneficial insects, all of which will make your vegetable garden grow better. And so when we vegetable garden, we should also be flower gardeners as well. It's a question of whether you want to have a fancy formal kind of bed like this, or just allow flowers to grow around your beds in a random pattern. Doesn't really matter. The idea is just to grow some flowers. But Thank you, Olivia, for showing this. I think it's really got some nice design elements. And like I said, for any of you, if you want to have your photo as the backdrop on the live stream, send it to Gardner Scott at gardnerscott.com and I'll add it to the queue. And I'm running low on photos, so I can definitely use photos, especially those of you who have the garden at its peak right now. Take some photos and send it to me. Let me know that I have your permission to use it, and we'll add it and let the rest of us see it as well. There's Jay. Thank you, on top of things about the youth organization 4-H. And I've worked with, over the years, different kids who were doing gardening 4-H projects. And so as a gardener in your area, that's one way that you can volunteer, is to work with 4-H. 4-H is managed by the Extension Service. So 4-H usually has a director at a county level, and they're side by side with the Master Gardener director and all the other extension services. So when I was so active in the Master Gardener program, I knew the 4-H director and also helped out in the 4-H program from a gardening perspective for those kids that were doing those kind of activities. So yeah, it's a great organization and they do a lot for the kids. So there you go, Gardens Happen. You've been posting some good videos of your garden. Give us some pictures of what you're growing. I'd love to have that. Thanks for that. Yeah, and so another thing. So this plant is elephant ears. That's what Bohemian herbology is talking about. The variation of the foliage. You know, the elephant ear leaves over here, and then the tall stalks of the plant over here. Another great design element. And so hostas and elephant ears, those plants that have the big leaves, can really add some nice visual elements depending on where you're growing and have shade or not shade. Of course, you do have to match the plant. So awesome to be thinking about that. I know I hadn't seen those pictures in quite a while either. So let's see. Jeff is saying, zone 4B, would I be able to take a store-bought clove of garlic and plant that? And so good question. So most of the garlic that we buy in the stores here in the United States is a soft neck garlic. And you're going to see that even in other areas of the world. Because the soft neck garlic stores better, like we already talked about, it tends to be what is sold in the supermarket, because they can harvest it and ship it and then put it out for sale, and it's going to maintain the quality for months. Yes, you can take store-bought garlic and plant it, being aware that it's probably going to be a soft neck variety. In zone 4B, it might not do as well as other hard neck varieties, but go for it. The store-bought garlic bulbs are going to be much cheaper than the bulbs you're going to buy online for the purpose of planting garlic. Some of those garlic cloves from the store might be treated with a chemical that inhibits sprouting, because even though it stores for a long period of time, they don't want it sprouting when it's in the supermarket. So there might be an inhibitor on it to keep it from sprouting, which might lead to some problems where it might not grow. But usually when you put it in the ground and if you keep watering it, it's not going to be an issue. That inhibitor will leach away from it, but that could be an issue. Also be aware that the flavor is going to be different. So if you like the store-bought garlic flavor, then plant it, because you are essentially cloning the plant. And so when you take a bulb and plant those cloves, it's going to grow into the exact same plant with the exact same flavor. And so that's one nice thing about buying store garlic and tasting it and liking it and then planting it, is you know exactly what you're going to get in your garden. So I would say try it. 4B might be a little cold, but it's worth a try. And I know many people that have had success growing store-bought garlic in all zones. Ideally, you would choose an organic garlic because then you'll know it hasn't been sprayed with anything. But your choice, your option. Give it a try and let us know a year from now how it turns out. Hopefully, it'll be exactly what you're looking for. So, okay, let's see. So I'm trying to catch back up. Scrolling on down, seeing what I missed. Yeah, so nice to see so many of you talking about pictures in the background and things like this. Francis says, heard a great idea about observing gardens. Pretend you're doing a garden tour for YouTube. This forces one to really examine details. Yeah, good idea, actually. I'm always looking at my garden, thinking about how I would make a video about it, and it does force me to examine the details because I want things to look good. But yeah, that's actually a really good idea. Any way to get you to look closer at your garden and your plants and what you're doing in the garden, I think is a great idea. And so many of us are in the garden by ourselves, maybe with some friends or family, and we're happy in our garden. But if you start thinking about what if the whole world were to look at my garden, what would they see? Yeah, that's a nice perspective. And it might open your eyes a little bit. Not to be critical to yourself, not for you to say, wow, people would hate this and people would think I'm not a good gardener. No, don't look at it that way at all. Look at it as you're walking through the garden and you see your beautiful tomato plant and you're harvesting all those tomatoes to make sauce and thinking, wow, what would the world think if they saw this plant in my garden? So I would suggest trying to look at the positives as well as those things that maybe you hadn't identified until you realized, wow, if someone else were looking at this, they'd wonder why I have so many holes in my lettuce. Well, it could be because you let the aphids into your lettuce so that the aphids attract the laced wings and the ladybugs, and the rest of your garden is desirable and has no holes in it because all those insect predators took care of the aphids that you allowed to eat your lettuce. So, there's lots of ways that you could look at this when you think that someone else would be looking at your garden and what kind of questions they would ask. And it does help you focus and think about describing or how you would describe what you do to someone else. And when you describe what you do to someone else, it really helps you understand better what it is you're doing. I said, I've got videos about this where I think the best way to learn is to teach. If you force yourself to explain what you're doing to someone else, it really helps you solidify in your brain what you're doing, and it really makes it more understandable, not just for you, but for other people as well. Francis says, I would give credit for the observation idea, but can't remember who suggested it. No, I appreciate that you would do that, but yeah, you don't have to apologize. I think it's a good idea. Gardens Happen says, I was asking myself, what would the world think when I started making videos? Yeah, there you go. And so Gardens Happen has a few videos and just showing the garden and giving tours of the garden. And that's a tough step to take, being willing for the world to see what you're doing and releasing it on YouTube. So credit to you, and I'm glad you're doing it. But yeah, asking that question is a tough one, especially to actually take the action and do it without worrying about what the world thinks about what you're doing. So, okay, let's see. So nice to see everybody here today. Raphelia's wondering, how can I be sure my Petit Gris de Rennes melon is ripe for picking? I want to get it before the critters do. And so generally for most of the melons, a really good indicator is that the top of the melon, where it connects to the vine, it's going to start changing color. And so when it's green, it's not ripe yet. And so as the top of the plant begins to change color, and eventually when it turns brown, then it's definitely time to harvest because the melon is no longer receiving any nutrition from the plant. Look for that change. That's a real good indicator of the time that is starting to get ripe. You you can, if you've grown them before, you can usually with melons pick them up and the weight changes. They start getting heavier when they're getting closer to harvest. Some of them will have a color change, so where they're resting on the ground, that is hidden from the sun. And so for many melons, like watermelons is a good example of this, where they're resting on the ground is going to be white because it's not getting any sunlight. Even the melon does some photosynthesis with the green color. And so it's not getting any sun and it's white. As the melon gets closer to maturity and being fully ripe, that white will change to more of a yellow color. And so I'm not sure about that specific melon, but look for that as well. Where it's resting on the ground, look for a color change. And as that color gets darker, then the melon is becoming riper as well. And then what I often do, when it looks like the stem is starting to turn darker and that patch where it's connected to the ground is getting darker, if you're growing half a dozen melons, I'll pick one and cut it open and taste it. And if it's good, then I'll harvest all of them. If it needs a couple more days, then I'll wait a couple more days and then harvest another one. So taste and texture is a great way. You're going to be eating them anyway. Might as well just eat one early. If it's not fully ripe, that's okay. You can still eat it. Sprinkle some sugar on it if you want it sweeter. But that, for me, is really the best way to test whether the melons are done or not. And you get better with time and the experience. And so it's one of those things that you can figure out which method works best for you this year. Make note of it in your garden journal. Grow it again next year. And then next year, hopefully, you'll have a little more understanding, or at least feeling for when the time is right to get those plants growing. Raphael says it's still green and I'm so excited. Successfully grew them the first time. Good for you. Yeah, I've got some melons growing. Hope the weather holds out. I like the warm weather and I hope it stays longer as far as the melons are growing, because I have difficulty growing melons here in Colorado and they're getting close. Mine are I'm getting excited about it as well. It's one of those things that keep your fingers crossed. Hopefully it'll be good. Urban Chicken Mama says the watermelon tendril closest to the stem dies of and gets crispy, or dies off, then gets crispy and the melon's ready to harvest. There you go. Yeah, it's that same concept of the browning is what you're looking for. Gardens Happen says, my Everglade tomatoes have been taking off. Unfortunately, they haven't been making it to the kitchen. Yeah, I have a lot of cherry tomatoes that are that way. My raspberries are really starting to ripen as well, and especially the first of the raspberries or the tomatoes or whatever, they don't make it to the kitchen. But hey, that's part of the fun of gardening, is eating it out in the kitchen and enjoying it. Frank says, I'm related to many salt on melon people, just plain and sweet for me. There you go. I'm looking forward to my melons and eating the flesh. I also like making rind pickles, watermelon pickles, usually watermelon rind. And I'm not sure how thick the rind will be on some of these melons I'm growing, but I agree. I like salt on melon, and I also like to pickle the rind and try that as well. So there's lots of fun stuff you can do with melons and enjoy not only the growing, but the harvesting, but then the different ways that you can eat them. So let's see. Oh yeah, protecting with pantyhose are similar. Yeah, you can actually pantyhose, netting, there's lots of things like that you can wrap around your melons, especially if you're growing on a trellis or if you have animals. Then I think it's one of those things that you can keep trying new things and keep finding out what works, and a lot of them do work. So thanks so much, GOS85. I'm a legend and my ideas are being used. Thank you so much for that. Yeah, I would do this and I would talk even if you didn't use my ideas. I appreciate you think that I'm a legend, but I'm so glad so many of you have had so much success in the years that I've been making these videos and helping you out, because I love doing it, but I love sharing and hearing from others when they're having the success with it as well. I think that's important. So good vibes back to you, Jihad. Thank you so much for that. Good evening as well. So, okay, let's see. I'm going to do a couple more. The garlic, one of the other things I wanted to talk about, the garlic, when we talk about the hard versus the soft neck varieties, when you grow hard neck varieties, that hard neck, that stalk that is sent up, that's called a scape, a garlic scape. And those are edible too. And so years ago, I think it's about 5 years ago now, I made a video on making pesto using the garlic scapes. And so, like we were just talking about with the melons, garlic is unlimited in how you can use it. We know about cooking with it and its flavor, but you can use the leaves, especially if you grow the spring garlic where you're not trying to get the bulb. And you can use the scape if you're growing the hardneck variety. They all still have that garlicky flavor. The texture will just be different, whether it's a leaf or a scape or the clove that you're using. But branch out a little bit. Think about how you're going to use the different parts of your garlic plant, and it can open up a whole new nutrition opportunity and culinary opportunity when you start playing with garlic scapes and using them in salads or pestos or stir fries. And I did this not knowing. First couple times I grew my hardneck garlic, I just cut the scapes off and threw them into the compost pile, not fully understanding that they could be a really interesting way to use that part of the plant. So think about that as well when you grow your garlic and you're choosing between softneck and hardneck, and you haven't grown hardneck before, add a hardneck variety to your plans and then look for those scapes developing in spring. You cut them off. They have a little curl at the top. Cut them off before they straighten, because they will take energy away from the bulb. So you'll get a smaller bulb if you allow the scapes to fully develop. But you cut them off, that allows the bulb to continue to grow. And it's an early way to get that garlic flavor in your kitchen, because you'll usually cut the scapes off the plant a month, maybe even 6 weeks before you're harvesting the garlic, and still being able to use the plant while the garlic is still growing in the ground. So how good is that, to basically get 2 harvests of a similar flavor when you're growing something like garlic? So yeah, there you go. Rick says scapes will reduce the bulb size. Absolutely. So scapes are great. Francis loves scapes. That's really good. And think about using the scapes if you're growing that kind of garlic, because you don't want to miss out. You might not like it, that they're different, but try it. It's one of those things that you may decide that you absolutely love and you want to keep doing for the and then grow the garlic scapes exclusive, or the hardneck varieties exclusively, because you like the scapes so much. And I know some people that just love the scapes so much that they aren't growing softnecks anymore because they like getting all those scapes. So good option. Andrea, thank you so much for that super chat. Thanks for the excellent information. Great topic today. I'm ready to plant garlic. There you go. And so I'll talk a little bit to end the actual garlic discussion here. And so I completely agree with you, Andrea. I'm ready to plant the garlic too. Be careful about planting too early. And so you really want to plant your garlic when it's getting colder. The 4 to 6 weeks before the freeze point is when you want to start thinking about getting the garlic in the ground. The soil will remain warmer than the air temperature for months. And so what happens is you put the garlic in the ground and it's cold outside. It stimulates the growth of the garlic. It'll actually start sending out roots, and you'll get root development, and then the ground freezes. Then in the spring, when the ground thaws and the temperatures of the soil start increasing, the clove already has the roots in the soil, and then it sends up the shoot and it grows into a garlic plant and you have your bulb. If you plant too early, what happens is you'll get that initial root development. The colder temperatures will stimulate the plant to grow, but now you have a garlic plant that is growing before winter comes in. Then the winter comes in and it can kill all those leaves and the top part of the plant. So now you've got your clove that is directing energy into developing a plant. It develops a plant and then that plant is killed off. The clove will probably still survive and you can expect that it will sprout again in spring, but you're going to get a much smaller plant. You're going to get a much smaller bulb because it's already expended so much energy in autumn because it was planted too early. So that's a big reason why we plant our cloves later, and we're not trying to get the plant to grow. We're just trying to get the clove to send out the root structure to support the plant that's going to grow in spring. And so think about that as far as timing, as well as if you put it in too late, after the soil is really cold and getting much closer, like just a couple weeks from freezing, the clove doesn't have enough time to develop the roots. And so now you've got a clove that you put in the ground. It doesn't come alive and send out roots, and it could actually be killed over the course of the winter or might rot because it hasn't started that growth process. So that 4 to 6 week window is really what you're targeting to have the best success with garlic. And a lot of that is because of what's happening underground that we don't even see during that time period until the winter sets in and really cold temperatures start to develop. So hope that helps out a little bit. I wanted to, and plays in with everything we've been talking about today, but to encourage you to think about gardening, not just with your garden, but like talking about the picture that Olivia sent us for the background today and all these other ideas of people sharing what they're doing in their garden. And to recognize that your garden is different than my garden and my garden is different than everybody else's garden. And to really start, kind of like we were talking about with the focusing on what would the world think if they saw my garden, flip that around a little bit. What do you think when you look at other people's gardens, particularly gardens that are around the world? Do you just look at it from that, oh, that garden's beautiful, or that garden looks terrible, or why am I looking at this garden? It makes no sense to me. Or do you focus? Do you take that next step and say to yourself, what is it about this garden that I can learn? What is it that this person in this other location is trying to show me? Because they're sharing it with the world, which is why I'm able to see it. And the reason I say this is I was thinking in the last couple of days, I make videos year round. Most of you know that. But my growing season in the vegetable garden is only about 130 days. So it's only the videos I'm making at this time of year that show my lush garden and my beautiful plants and all these things I'm growing. Most of my videos, the great majority of the videos I've made in the last 10 years, do not show the beautiful green lush garden. And occasionally I get a comment from a new viewer looking at one of my videos saying, why would anyone listen to this gardener? He doesn't grow anything. Well, yeah, they're commenting on a video that I released in February in Colorado when nothing is growing. And so they're just looking at the surface. They're looking at me walking through my garden, telling you how to plan or how to prepare your garden. And I make videos in February when nothing is growing. For those of you that take that extra step to think about, what is this gardener trying to convey to me? What is it that I can learn from them? You're way past that. You're part of the Gardener Scott community. And you know that if I'm walking through a garden with nothing growing, it's probably November, December, January, February, March, that time frame, and nothing's growing in my garden. And you're able to focus on what I'm saying and what the message is, and you're becoming a better gardener as a result of that. And so as you look beyond just the Gardener Scout videos to other channels and other videos, discern the same way. Think about what they're doing, what they're trying to convey to you, what you can learn from them, and it helps us, I think, be less critical of others. It helps us be more positive when it comes to gardening because we're looking for that thing we can learn. We're looking for something that maybe we can do different in our garden to have more success. And I think that is more beneficial. I just think it's so sad when I get a comment from someone like that saying, why would I listen to you because nothing's growing? How shallow is that? You know, they're missing out on so much by being so critical and so judgmental with just a view of a couple frames of a video without recognizing when the video was made and what the message is. And so for all of you, as you move forward, and like Gardens Happen was talking about in releasing the videos that they have of their garden, take that step and be willing to share what you have in your garden with everybody else without worrying about what others are going to say. Because I still do my videos. I don't care that someone is being critical of me because they're the ones that are in the wrong. They're the ones that aren't listening and paying attention. And I'm making these videos for you, for everyone who wants to become a better gardener. You can do the same thing. Use your garden as a background on a show. Use your garden as just make some simple tour videos of what you're doing. Don't be afraid of what others are going to think of your garden. Be proud of what you're doing in the garden and be proud to share it. Because a true gardener, a real gardener, is going to see past the eaten leaves and the weeds and the brown of a season that's long since passed. They're going to see past that, and they're going to see you as a gardener who's willing to share what you're doing with everybody else. And I think that is extra special. And I think all of us should be willing and should want to share what we're doing because the rest of us are going to soak it up and we're going to learn so much from you being able to share with us. So that's what I wanted to share with you today. Just the concept that it can be hard if you think you're going to be criticized by what you're doing, but don't worry about that. Be happy with how you're gardening and be happy that you have the opportunity to share it. And I look forward to you sharing it with me. I love showing the backgrounds of other people's gardens because we can all benefit from it. And you know, it's tough. I get thousands and thousands of comments, and it is tough when someone is critical of me, but it's their loss. It's not my loss. And hopefully you can recognize that within yourself as well. So Bobby, thank you so much for that. And I appreciate you appreciating me as well. And you as well, Heidi and Jeanette. Thank you for all of that. I love doing this, and I want you all to be the best gardeners that you can be. And I'm just doing my little bit that I can. And I know that I'm not going to be here forever. And that's why I encourage you so much to carry the torch just within your own neighborhood, if that's all it is. Because if we all were to become gardeners, and the whole world, all of us, and we are a global gardening audience, if all of us could share what we're doing with everybody else, oh, wouldn't that be such a wonderful world? So yeah, I'm doing my part, and I do appreciate all that all of you are doing, and I'll keep doing what I'm doing, to include doing it next Monday and the Monday after, and as many Mondays as we can have together. So I hope you have a wonderful gardening week. I know the weather has been so challenging. The eastern and southern parts of the United States are just being flooded beyond comprehension. The west of the United States is being burned by wildfires. All of us seem to have our own individual troubles within our garden, like those of us that are having this extreme heat, but that's part of gardening. That's why it becomes so enjoyable because we can overcome the adversity, and that melon that we're waiting to be ripe when we harvest it becomes the best thing that's happened to us in that day, that week, even that month or year. One of my most memorable gardening moments was harvesting a cantaloupe, a muskmelon, that I think to this day is the best melon I've ever tasted because it came from my garden. And it was the very first one I grew. How good is that? That's incredible. Colorado Bird Nerd, thank you so much for that super chat. Always nice to have you here. I look forward to seeing you, Colorado Bird Nerd, and everybody else here next Monday, where we'll do this all over again and answer your questions. Yankee Sista, nice to have you as well. I love you all being my Monday family. And I know I'll think about that as I was getting ready to start the show today, that everyone's saying hello to everybody else when we start the show. Yeah, we're just a big family, gardening family, and I'm glad that I could be part of it. So thank you so much. See you here next week. Have a great gardening week. I'm Gardener Scott, and of course, enjoy gardening.